A very good morning once again to you. How are you doing this morning?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited because I love any opportunity to talk about neurodiversity. I'm doing quite well. I'm excited to answer all of your questions and to share my knowledge with you.
Yes. So my name is Moketi Maimane, and you're going to be with Afriberry right here. We're going to be doing this interview and having a conversation with you, of course, with people who are watching from home. So to someone who is watching and they don't understand what is a neurodiversity, can you please take them through what is neurodiversity and what does it offer?
Yeah, sure. So neurodiversity is an umbrella term for all neurodevelopmental differences. So like autism, ADHD, all those buzzwords that we're all hearing a lot on social media. Neurodiversity is the umbrella term for that. So it's also kind of like a social justice movement because we are against sort of the medical model that says it's a problem. It's an illness that needs to be treated and erased from society. So the neurodiversity model says that it's part of our identity. It's something that we're proud of. It's a community that we're proud of to be a part of. So yeah, that's neurodiversity in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So here we hear that you were diagnosed as an adult. Can you please walk us through, before you were diagnosed and how were you diagnosed?
Yeah, so I went through school and university completely undiagnosed. Even when I had struggles at university, they still said, oh, it's anxiety or depression. They'll rather give it any other label other than what it really is. So I was only diagnosed when my son was 2, and I started seeing some differences in him. And I was like thinking, okay, because I studied psychology, but it's very little in our curriculum. So I did a lot of research, and then I was diagnosed ADHD when I was 26. I'm now 31, and this year I was diagnosed autistic. So it's quite a long journey, especially for girls and women, especially for Black people, because they are often overlooked and misdiagnosed with all kinds of other things, simply because we don't fit the socially acceptable idea of a neurodiversity.
Hi, Jace. I hope you're
Yeah.
feeling good. So I wanted to know, because you were first diagnosed with ADHD,
Mhm.
and now you recently got diagnosed with autism. How has the balance between your two diagnoses been so far, and what role has it played in your daily routine?
Yeah. So I would say my struggle is mostly with the ADHD bits, the executive functioning and all of the emotional stuff that comes along with ADHD, and then concentration and focus. Autism, the diagnosis is just a little kind of like affirming, just to know, okay, these differences in how I relate socially are not because I'm weird or something's wrong with me. It's because my brain is wired differently in that way. So I think having both diagnoses is helpful to understand myself better, for people around me to understand. Because that's the thing. That's why I advocate for early intervention. From as young as 2 or 3, we can make diagnoses so that we don't get all of these alternative labels like naughty or stupid or um, depressed or anxious, so that we can have the right label so people around us can know how to help us and how to understand us.
Mm. So, so Jess, there are so many examples of neurodiverse conditions, and when you speak about social media, we hear that there's no noise that's being made and there's no awareness that is being made. Do you think that they are making relevant steps into making sure that the people are aware of neurodiverse people?
I think it's starting. I think the advocacy that people have been doing the past 10 to 20 years is only now starting to pay off. Like my mother listens to the radio station RSG, and they are having a, a couple of shows on there. So I'm thinking if we're reaching such conservative platforms, maybe we are getting there. But I think it's a slow climb because our country is conservative. It would rather think that children are problematic and would rather spank it out of them than think scientifically about it.
Yeah, I can attest to that when it comes to those slow steps. I mean, the station that you heard about, the small station that they're speaking about, the neurodiverse people and things like that. Also, the Vooka Breakfast Show. That's why we took this step to speak to
Mm,
people like you, because
mm,
I can tell you that when you mention neurodiversity, in our townships, a lot of people will ask you, what is that?
mm,
Right? So I see here the example of neurodiverse for someone who doesn't understand and who is watching, just to give them a glimpse of the conversation that we are trying to draw here. So we have ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder. We have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and dyslexia and Tourette syndrome. And now, when we look into these examples of the neurodiverse conditions, what are the challenges have you dealt with, especially somebody who was diagnosed with one of them?
Yeah, so I didn't have as many challenges as a child, but I think your audience may want to see what should they look out for in their children, because that's also mainly who I work with is children. So you want to look out for your child either being the one that's really struggling at school, struggling to fit in, struggling academically, struggling emotionally. So you want to look at those. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you want to look at those young ones who are really outperforming everyone. They are perfectly fine. It's almost like they're the too good student. So I'm also always concerned about those because what happens is you are masking and you are coping for now because you realize you don't want to be like the ones that don't fit in and aren't making it academically. And then they burn out. After matric or in university, they hit the wall and they burn out. So we want to have a look for behavioral things. So if your child's teacher is saying that they are naughty or they are not paying attention or they have ants in their pants or they are like daydreaming or they are getting into physical fights at school. These are all the types of things we want to flag.
Yeah, yeah. So, in terms of you knowing that, because sometimes in your stages of life, you find out some of the diagnosis later. So, I just want to ask that is someone born with it, or they can develop it over time?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for asking that because that's very important. It is hereditary. So you do inherit it from your parents. That's why early diagnosis is possible because there are some signs that we know of from literally infancy. The only times that it would be something that you develop is if you've maybe had a severe brain injury and then this is like a comorbid condition, or if you've maybe when you were born there was some oxygen deprivation, then autism can be a comorbid condition. There are some other things that like being a preemie, being born too early, if the mother was an older mother, those types of things are kind of the old school indicators that we should have it looked at, but 90% of it is hereditary, and we have quite a high rate of incidence in South Africa.
Mm.
Hey, so you know what? At this moment, while you also teaching us about about the different conditions it has, I'm actually online and I'm like looking at the types of different conditions. It's a lot. Some of them are not. It's things that I've never even thought would actually be considered problem, because I see there's one that has to do with time blindness, and I'm like, okay, I never knew that, because so besides that, what are the most common things or most common factors that a person can look out for to say that, okay, I may have a certain time blindness or mind blindness, or basically anything that has to do with my neurology? What are the signs that a parent can look out to or out for when it comes to the kids, that, okay, you know what, I need to take my son, my daughter for a checkup in case they have autism, ADHD, mind blindness, all time blindness?
Yeah. Your research skills are amazing, firstly, because mind blindness and time blindness are like one of the like much lesser known things, and it's one of the ones I love to talk about. Okay, so let me talk through the ADHD, and then I'll talk through the autism, and then we'll see if there's time for some of the lesser known things. So for autism, there has to be social differences. So either your child is really not interested in playing with others, or if they are interested in playing with others, other children might experience them as strange, that type of thing. So, but there has to be a social difference. Then there has to be a sensory component. So maybe they're a picky eater, like they only eat certain things, they won't eat certain things, or their clothes bug them. My daughter's always saying it hurts her clothes, even though it's the softest material. So that's a sensory component. And then there has to be a repetitive or restrictive component. So they are very interested in the things they are interested in. They only want to talk about Paw Patrol, or they only want to talk about their soccer team. But to an extent where they almost don't give another person a chance to talk about their interests. So it's very intense and repetitive. So that's the autistic side. And then autistic people have the mind blindness that you are talking about. So they struggle to put themselves in the shoes of other people. Almost the common belief used to be that people who are autistic are not able to empathize, or they don't have any empathy. But they do have empathy. It just is. It looks different. So sometimes I will be an autistic person and wonder, are they a little bit of a narcissist? Because they are so selfish. They are so like my interests, my way of doing things, my routine, that type of thing. So that's the mind blindness. They really cannot put themselves in your shoes. They can't. Then with ADHD, we look at the common things like the concentration, the focus, the hyperactivity. Although for women, because women are often underdiagnosed, for women the hyperactivity is in the brain. So it's not necessarily that you can't sit still. It's that your brain is all over the place. Exactly. My teachers used to always say, such a pleasure to have in class, but she talks too much. So that's typical. That's typical ADHD girl. Yes, and then ADHD struggles with the time blindness. So time blindness is this thing where you either very late or very early, but you're almost never on time.
What?
What?
Our country suffers from time blindness.
When you say that, we are laughing here because it kind of reminds us of somebody that we have here. And then I think actually everybody that works here, we suffer from time blindness actually, because we either too early or a bit late, but just in between, but it's never just at the right time. And then so when you said that women who actually suffer from ADHD actually tend to like think a lot. So I wanted to know that if it also requires, if it's also the same to boys, because I'm referring to my son. He talks a lot. Half the time he doesn't even listen to anything that you say, and then he comes back out of nowhere. Just when you think he's done, he comes back again. Like he'd come back to you like every after 10 minutes and just ask you the same thing, because it keeps zoning out of his head that he asks you that same thing. So I wanted to know that, as that's how is that how we can actually also spot ADHD when it comes to our kids?
Yes, definitely. And the boys also, they can have that motor mouth thing, and they can have the inattention where it almost looks as if they are listening, but they're not hearing. It's not going in. It's when we will often say they don't have ears, or their ears are not working, or they are sitting on their ears. That's very typical. But we have to be sure that we understand the line, because there's some developmentally appropriate things, like kids do ask why questions a lot, or kids do go off on tangents while they're telling stories. But is it mostly like that? Is it very intensely like that? That's the line. That's a little difficult to determine.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jess, for taking us through that, because there's a parent who is watching right now and they're detecting some of these behaviors, on their children, and they don't know what to do. But now, maybe someone is watching and they're experiencing the same thing that you're experiencing, and
Yeah.
now they take their child for a diagnosis. Now they're
Mhm.
diagnosed. So, how is it, and how is it going to be treated then?
Mhm. Okay, so yeah, diagnosis is the first step, and that can be a long process, especially if you have to go through the route. If you don't have private medical aid, that's a long process. But I'd like to touch on that later. Okay, so once you have diagnosis, I think the most important, not I think, science shows that the most important therapy is for the parents. If the parents can go and get help to understand their child better, and if they can have a space to let out the frustrations that they are feeling. So if they could go to a support group, or if they could see a counselor that specializes in neurodiversity, that's the number one treatment. Number two is for parents not to do homework with their children. That ruins the relationship. So if you could find your child a tutor or a homework center or something like that, so that you eliminate that point of conflict. Then for the child, it depends. It depends on their functioning and their need level. But typically, I'm pro medication, so there might be some form of medication, even if that's natural, even if that's your preference. Often, children need occupational therapy, and then they can definitely benefit from neurodiversity affirming therapy. So for them to understand themselves better, for them to learn that I have a Ferrari brain with bicycle brakes. I have a superhero brain, but I have some kryptonite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when is the right time to say, now I need to take my child to a doctor or a counselor?
Mhm. Well, like I said, advocate for as early as 2 years old, but I think you might even some pediatricians, with my son, they kept saying to me, let's wait until he's 7. Let's wait until he goes to school. Let's wait and see if he struggles. But neurodiversity affirming care says as early as possible. My goal would be for children to be screened, standardized, as early as possible. But it's never too late. That's the other side of it. You don't have to think, okay, we missed it at 2 or 3, or we missed the 11-year mark. It's never too late. So, but I would say if you are looking for someone in your area, if you can, when you Google, just make sure to say neurodiversity affirming, because we find a lot of doctors and professionals who are still in the stone age of neurodiversity.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So now, as you mentioned that you're going to be going through other condition later. So I have one for you that I want you to help me debunk, right? So this one is called Tourette's, right?
Okay.
So is Tourette's real? I ask because that we have seen on social media, especially there's this other documentary, The Bailey, that's playing on TNT. This girl has a text, she say random things, and some
Yes.
of those things are vulgar words. So can you
Yes.
please take us through if it is real, and what do you know of Tourette's syndrome?
So Tourette's is definitely not my specialty, but I know enough to answer your question. It is real. It definitely is real. It's a tic disorder, and we know that it's real because we can also medicate it, and it can, improve. So it is a real condition. It's interesting that that a lot of people with Tourette's tend to say those kind of vulgar words or inappropriate things. I don't know. I don't know the science behind why the mind takes that route. It's interesting, but that being said, I think a lot of people are faking it on TikTok because it is kind of like a buzz thing at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's frustrating for the Tourette's community who really do have the struggle because they are very often ostracized from their community because they can be so inappropriate.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that. Because yeah, speaking of social media, when you say it's fake, we've always had this discussion here, and asking ourselves, how can this person say this? Because they say relevant things that we see on our everyday to day life. Maybe I have a take about Cyril Ramaphosa. I say I've buried Cyril Ramaphosa in my backyard. I'm like, how can you say that? And I will come and say, no, it's a syndrome that I have, and I say things out of nowhere. But thank you so much for that. Now let's talk around the misconceptions, on the neurodiverse conditions. What are some of the misconceptions that you want to raise here about the neurodiverse people?
So
Especially to the neurotypical people. I just
yes,
learned
oh,
that.
I love your use of neurotypical. Yes, so I think people think if you are diagnosed neurodiverse, then you don't have a future. And that's not the truth. Your future might look different. Like I said, my husband is also diagnosed and he's a very successful engineer. But some other people might not reach that level of independence. But regardless, a diagnosis is not, what do I want to say? It's not a prison sentence or it's not the end of the world. Your child will have a future. Maybe they won't leave the house at 18. Maybe they'll leave the house at 25. Maybe they'll study from home for a while. I think that's the biggest misconception is that people think a neurodiverse person is incapable and will never reach independence. And that's the most important one to debunk, I think.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So here on the Vooka Breakfast Show, we always focus on the positive things, and we know that if you do have some of the conditions, there are some benefits on having those conditions. Can you tell us about the benefits, of the conditions that you have?
Yeah, so I love this bit also. Ugh, you guys are asking all of my favorite questions. I'm so chuffed. Yes, so if you look at neurodiversity as a whole, I'll use this island story. If we send 10 people to an island and they have to kind of populate the island, they have to build structures and put infrastructure in place. If we send 10 people who think exactly the same way, that island will not develop. So neurodiverse people are needed for the world to develop in different ways. Um, for example, autistic people can hyper focus. It's called hyper focus on a specific, since it's their special interest. They can hyper focus on something until they solve it. So I really think most scientists, most doctors, most people who've made breakthroughs were probably autistic in some way or another because they had to hyper focus on this problem. If you think about maybe in the primal days, why would autism and ADHD have evolved to still be with us now? It's because it was beneficial at some point. It was beneficial that that autistic person thought, okay, this plant, let me figure out how I can use this plant in medicine or how many different uses this plant has. And then the ADHD strength, excuse me, is impulsivity. I think impulsivity can be a real strength. Impulsivity is what drives entrepreneurs. It's what drives innovation. It's what drives taking a chance to see if something will work. So I think, those are two of the most prominent superpowers that we come with.
Yeah. Great, great, great. So, can you share some of the successes, on when you attended, some of the counseling, went to see a specialist, and they have told you and went through with you some of the things that you can do that are outside of what people perceive you to become. So, share with us some of the success stories of going and meeting people with these conditions, and you get to hear what they have done. What are those some of success stories?
Yeah, I think I can share my own son's success story first because I was so personally involved in it, and I've seen, and everyone around us has seen what a difference early intervention has made in his life. So, like I said, the doctors just kept telling me kind of, yeah, there's something, but it's not, he doesn't have a strong autism profile, and we can't diagnose ADHD until 7. But I didn't accept it. And so I pushed and I pushed. And when he was 4 years old, we got the diagnosis. And at that point, he could only speak very little. Excuse me. He could only speak very little, maybe 3-word sentences. And other children with autism might be completely non-speaking at that stage. But he could speak very little. He had constant meltdowns, so that's what people would think is a tantrum. He was just a very unhappy little boy, constantly angry and frustrated, and he couldn't communicate that to us well. And so when he was about 4, we started with occupational therapy, we started with medication, and he did some play therapy as well. And now he is 7, and he is a very regulated young man. He's not constantly having meltdowns. He is so emotionally attuned with himself, with other people around him. It's actually uncommon for an autistic boy to be this way. Most people don't believe me when I say that he's on the spectrum. They might still believe the ADHD because his body's very busy.
Yeah.
But so that's, I think, the best success story. And then also my daughter, she's 3, and we had her diagnosis, and the lady said to us that it's the first happy autistic girl that she'd evaluated because we were accommodating for her from birth. So this is what we want. We want happy autistic and ADHD people from as young as 3.
Ah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jess, because I know that when somebody hears this and they get to hear you speak of those success stories, they will believe that it is possible because we have spoken about the misinterpretation and the consequences of, misinterpreting someone who has these kind of conditions. But with that being said, thank you so much for taking your time and, talk with us right there with our audience on the Vooka Breakfast Show. So if anyone wants to reach out, to you and speak about, the challenges and the problems that they're having around neurodiversity,